This podcast is brought to you by Penji. Penji is a creative subscription service that gives you access to pre-vetted, agency-trained creatives from all over the world. From graphic design to illustrations to social media management and web development, it's all included for one monthly price. It's time to say goodbye to the hassle of searching for top-notch creative talent. With Penji, you get quality and consistency delivered right to your inbox every day. Carefully crafted for you by humans. So meet your new creative team today. Head over to penji.co for more and enter the coupon code located within the podcast show notes.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the Fully Managed podcast. Thank you, Rotimi, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for reaching out and setting this up.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for joining me again. I am super excited for today, especially this game is a new one. So I'm very excited to, start with the usual, which is something a little fun. Okay, so this game is called, might sound intimidating at first, but don't worry. It's going to be a great time. Okay, this game is called Design It Blind. So I'm going to give you a conceptual project, and you are going to, obviously this is going to be on audio, so you'll have to describe it to me to your vision to the best of your ability just by thinking about it now. Of course, we all can acknowledge that design is much more involved than just the brainstorming aspect, but this is what we're doing for the sake of this game. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Beautiful.
Bonus points for bad ideas, please.
I love bad ideas. I don't know. I mean, if you, everything starts with a bad idea. I think sometimes you can build on it, and I don't think any bad ideas are bad anyway. Just like there's no stupid questions.
Perfect.
Okay, so the first one is a smart mug that compliments you.
Okay. So what do I do from here?
Just design what you think the mug would look like. It's okay. Conceptually, obviously, because of course you're not drawing anything or sketching or anything involved. But just describe to me what you would envision.
Okay, so if I'm not taking myself, I'll do two concepts. One concept maybe is more along the lines of what we might actually do, and then another concept won't take itself too seriously. So the first concept, it would probably be a standard size mug, probably a little bit thicker, and it's going to have a bigger base at the bottom. So the liquid carrying capacity might be a little bit shorter. And it'll have speakers in a nice array all the way around, nice pattern, maybe some LED light that goes all the way around, kind of like an Amazon. I don't want to call the name for anybody who has one at home. And so when it responds to you, it starts to glow a little bit in response. And then the maybe more wild one would be a coffee mug with a pair of lips. This could get weird if you're drinking and touching the lips. But I just think something that, if it's speaking back to you or complimenting you, I mean, that could be kind of whimsical. And then maybe the speaker is, behind the lips. Even better, maybe it's smiling and it's got a gap tooth and the audio comes through the gap in the mouth. So
I love that. Oh no, I love absurdity and goofy things, so I think that is wonderful. And I think kissing a mug that compliments you is not really off base with what we're going through with AI. There are people that are in relationships with their AI chatbots and such, so it's not too crazy off base that I think there wouldn't be a market for the kissable mug.
There probably would be a market, yeah.
Okay, I'll give you one more and then we'll get into just you. But I love seeing people's visions for things, so that's why I love these games. It's just fun to get to just go into your mind a little bit. Okay, next one is a bike that folds into your backpack. I think this would be awesome if this actually did.
A bike that folds into your backpack. I like this idea a lot. What I would say is maybe it's a backpack already. So it's always a backpack. That way, when you're folding, you're not necessarily having to fold it and then put it in your backpack. Although carrying capacity will be limited. But we can imagine, let's see. Ooh, this could be tricky. The wheels. Okay. It would have to be small. It would have to have small wheels, very, very small wheels. And, Yeah, I would imagine it collapsing accordion style, and then the handlebars would need to swivel 90 degrees so that it stays flat. You might have trouble sitting down, but you could walk. So I like this idea. Go grocery shopping, put three potatoes in your bag, and then drive home. That's how
I
I see
think
it.
it's awesome. No, conceptually, I think it's a really, I mean, the design that you created just now is incredible. It is, I, I am not creative enough to not just think of, okay, bike. It's just standard bike, fold it up. That's it. That's what it is. But you put some practicality in it that makes a lot more sense, especially like for utility reasons. There are a lot of reasons why a foldable bike would be really helpful, but you're thinking about that, and that is your vision for going into it, which is really awesome. I see this is why picking your brain is important. Now I know.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you came up with the ideas already, right? It's just me building on top of them. I think the hard part is getting started. It's easy to hear an idea and build on it, say why it's not good or why it could be better, those types of things.
Yeah, but that's discrediting yourself because you created the plan for, I mean, often clients are coming to you with a vision already and you are developing and making that into fruition. And that is, so don't discount your participation in that process.
Well, I would say, and this is what I tell people all the time, anybody can create, anybody can problem solve. We don't have to be a designer or an engineer or creative to solve problems and fix things in your life. But I think where we really thrive is when we put pedal to the metal, right? I mean, I speak to my dad all the time. He has ideas. He calls me, hey, I want you to 3D print this thing. It's going to solve my problems, that type of thing. But he doesn't have the skill or the training to develop it from just an idea, from just something I can talk to someone about. So I think the exercise we did is very communicative and it works really well. But I think where I earn my paycheck, so to speak, is when we actually start to let's develop it. Let's make it real.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I have this. I love asking this question to people because I'm always curious about different people's take on it, specifically in the creative and marketing world. Do you think that creativity is a skill, or do you think that like something you can learn, or do you think that it's why am I forgetting the phrasing, but something that is just part of you?
Yeah.
And it seems like you're on the opposite or the former.
No, I think it's a mixture of both. I taught at the University of Illinois at Chicago for 7 years, and then I also did a small stint at Northwestern University in Chicago. And I have to believe that it can be taught, right? I mean, I've also taught a summer program with Offsite, and they do sort of this accelerated design program. And sometimes you have people that are non-designers and you can see what they come up with in 12 weeks, right? So while 12 weeks, I don't think is enough for you to be like a practicing professional, right? But it could be enough to refine an existing ability or to sort of spark that initial, interest and ability, right? I do think it requires some innate level of creativity and just being able to see the world differently. Just your desire to dive deeper into everyday things that a lot of people take for granted. I think those have to be just inherent in you. Because everyone's going to be a designer at some point in their life. They're going to come across a problem that needs to be solved or come across something that could be beautified or improved on. Like we all have that. But it's usually just every now and again when something's really bothering you that you're just motivated to like fix it, right? But for someone who has to do it every single day, then yeah, you have to have that innate desire because it can be very exhausting to turn your brain on and say, hey, I have to do this, right? But for me, my brain is always on. And so it has to be, right? We have limited time. 8 hours is not enough time to do your work. In a profession like this, I do think you could get your work done in 8 hours or less in a lot of different professions. But design, the more time you have for incubation, the better the ideas are going to be, right? So I'm always on, walking, washing dishes, driving. It just, things are always happening,
Yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think that's a really fair argument for both because there is. I like to think of it as training is kind of involved in making something no longer a hobby and being able to make it work, if that makes sense. So, like, for example, there are a lot of people that love to do crafts and different things like that, and they're artistic in that way, but they give up on them all the time. And they do it in their free time, and that's fun and all, but there's people that are, and that is a hobby because you can pick it up and do it whatever you want, but there's a very particular type of people that love a hobby and then could never implement it into work because they don't have that brain like you're talking about. Like they don't have, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're just choose a different profession. It's just not, that's being creative as something that you do every day and your brain is constantly thinking in that way is difficult for a lot of people. And maybe their brain just isn't wired that way in order to put that into fruition. Whereas, hobbyists, as I like to call them, are like anyone can pick up a hobby, so to speak, and maybe they're not going to be good at it or whatever it may be, but anyone can do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I think it can be exhausting if you don't have the stamina. And I think that's the key word, right? Like interest, anyone can have the interest. And honestly, it's a lot of fun to be creative. When we host brainstorm sessions with our corporate partners or even startups and smaller businesses, everybody gets involved and they love it. And it's some of the highlights of their day, right? But again, it's the difference between doing it for a few hours for a 1 day or 2 day workshop versus doing it every day for 10 years,
Yes, exactly. You have to really love something and really care about it in order to be able to do something that often, because then you become infuriated if it's not something that's for you.
Exactly. Well said.
So, speaking of, I mean, you just referred to your partnerships as well as we've just been talking about being creative. You've specifically talked about design being a partnership. What is the biggest challenge in a partnership, and how do you kind of turn it into creative fuel rather than like a friction?
So I guess there's different levels to the partnership, right? For me and my business, Show Design, I run the business with my wife, and it's a partnership in that sense. She runs the branding side of the design studio, and then I run the industrial design side. And then the other layer to partnership is the employees within the business. How do we work hand in hand with other folks in the company? Or even I've got my team of designers, which we focus on industrial design. That's physical hardware, product design, those types of things. And then my wife Candice has her team, which focuses on branding and brand development, graphic design, and those types of things, right? So we're often collaborating on projects together, as well as working within our disciplined teams. And then there's one more layer of partnership, and that's with our client, right? And I think that one is the biggest one, right? For me, when it comes to the studio, I have to just make sure, because my wife and I are partners, we have to have a strong enough rapport, right, where we can work together day in, day out, right? They say the partner you go into business with is really important. And just because we're married doesn't mean that it's destined to be a good partnership, right?
Yeah, no. There's a lot of people that are married that should never work together. So
Exactly.
that's really something that needs to be like,
Right.
yes, of
So
course.
for us, it works. But yeah, it's one of the biggest decisions of a lot of businesses, right? That's where you can build it. So we kind of start there with our dynamic. Then we go into like, how do we build a culture? How do we build a company where people want to work, and where we are excited because we're getting energy and able to give energy to the team, right? But then when it comes to, those environments may be a little bit easier to control because you set the tone, you decide how to build the culture, right? Then outside of that, this is where it gets tricky because your clients can come from anywhere, everywhere, right? from small companies to really massive companies. They can have different personalities. So how do you create effective partnerships? If not long-term partnerships that are really dynamic and ongoing, it might be a 3-week partnership. Like, hey, we're calling you guys because we want you to, design something in 3 weeks and move on. But in those 3 weeks, how are we leveraging each other's strengths, right? And so that's one of the things we like to do, and I think that's what's critical for a good partnership is everyone staying in their lane to a certain degree, right? Where where things get a little bit tricky is when I try to do your job, you try to do my job, right? And even my wife and I, sometimes I think I'm a graphic designer. And so, that's where we'll butt heads, or when she tries to tell me how things need to be manufactured or things like that, which she doesn't do often. That's where, we butt heads, right? And even with clients, right? So at the end of the day, it's like, how do I leverage your expertise? Sure, you're paying us to do this work, but you have decades of experience in this industry, way more experience than we do. So how can we leverage that experience that you have in this industry and leverage, the work that we've been doing over the last 10 years in building our competencies and our core skill sets? How do we leverage that, bring it together to develop the next thing,
Yeah, no, I love that perspective because I think that there's a lot of times because people see a client as coming to them for help, then they assume that, okay, well, I'm the expert on doing this, so I'm just going to do what I think is best. But they don't necessarily take that education that they kind of need from a client in order to understand an industry or whatever ins and outs are necessary to truly understand the big picture as a whole. And I think that's at a detriment to a lot of agencies or whatever business that is providing a service, because it's not, you might be an expert in exactly what you do, but if you're helping someone in an industry that is not what you do, then there's always a level of what works and what doesn't, and you might not necessarily be able to have as many insights as that person that's in that industry. And that going into those relationships with an open mind and understanding that is really great, rather than taking the high horse approach of, I know best because you're coming to me for help, so don't question what I'm, doing.
Yeah, and I think maybe part of the challenge with partnerships is ego. I have it. A lot of people have it, right?
It's human trait.
I don't think you can start a business without having some level of ego to say you want to put your fingerprint on something and grow something from the ground up and develop it. So, I mean, I think ego can be very helpful, but it can also get in the way. And I one of the best ways to disarm a situation and sort of create, harmony is just to be the dumb one for just a moment, or play the dumb role. There's this myth out there that, designers and engineers don't always get along. Well, it's a little bit true. And it depends on the company and the industry. But that's because designers are blue sky. They have wild ideas, crazy ideas. We want to change the world with the most amazing designs, and engineers have to make it work, right? So they're on the hook, right? You can crazy ideas you want, but we got to make this work, and we got 3 weeks to do it, right? So, or 6 months to do it, whatever the timeline is. So when that happens, a lot of times, during brainstorming sessions or meetings, you could butt head with someone. And so
not practical if you're of the engineering, so yeah.
Right. They might challenge you a lot at every step of the way, right? And so when I've been confronted with that, number one, always have multiple ideas up your sleeve, right? That happens. Try to have a thick enough skin where it doesn't bother you that they didn't like your idea or that they thought it was dumb, right? But number two, tell me why it doesn't work. I want to understand. You know what I mean? Not necessarily challenging you because I think you're wrong, but I teach me, that type of thing. And I've seen a lot of very egotistic, very sharp, very brilliant design engineers go just kind of oh, well, okay, here's why, and in that process, I can be learning and be oh, I see why you were so defensive about my idea. But now that I understand a little bit, what if we did it like this? And you just see the barrier has been broken down significantly, and there's a dialogue, right? So if you can find ways to do that within each partnership or collaboration, whether they're an engineer or a marketing professional or any other part of the business unit that you're working with, I think that helps to smooth and streamline that collaborative process a lot.
Yeah, no, I think that the most successful people are able to take feedback in stride, because it's even I spoke to someone the other day who said their favorite part of the design process is the feedback portion, which I was so shocked to hear, because I didn't know that there are people like that enjoy taking,
It's
criticism.
not my favorite part.
Yeah, I that was the first time I think I have heard that, but I thought it was really interesting and a great perspective, because I think that like learning moments, like when we were receiving feedback, are obviously really important, and at that time a lot of people beforehand can kind of fall in love with an idea because they're so excited about it, and that is so important to have and maintain, but it does really suck when it's kind of like pulled apart in a certain feedback process. And so like understanding what you're getting at is like understanding why something doesn't work. It almost happening earlier on is better, because you're able to adjust your future ideas for like, okay, well, in a past critique, for lack of better phrasing, you were told that, oh, this thing doesn't work. So when you go into a new project with that same element, you're like, oh, wait, let me readjust for, this next step, because that won't work out. And like that kind of teaches you for the future, because there are things that just don't work, even if they're an incredible idea on paper. And that's just something that, when you work within a team, you kind of have to recognize. And that's how, that's how it works.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's some caveats to that. Sometimes ideas will work in a different time with different technology, right? So it might not work today, but it might work, in a few years when technology is more easily accessible, cheaper, widespread, available, you name it. But yeah, I absolutely agree.
Exactly. And even like speaking of that misconception that you mentioned between engineers and designers, you mentor students, and you mentioned the colleges that you've worked at before. What misconceptions do you think young designers have, like earlier on in their careers or even beforehand?
It's a good question, because it could vary from student to student. I can tell you one of my big misconceptions when I was graduating and entering the field, which was design is fun and the most amazing thing, and that sort of naivete and just excitement for it is fantastic. It'll carry you very, very far, and it's carried me incredibly far. But I think my first big shock was that it's hard work, right? Because in school, it's like you drive the ship a lot of ways. Like, sure, your professors will guide you and tell you, to fix certain things, that type of thing, but it's your project. You know what I mean? There might be a brief, but you get to take it. Once you start working with real life constraints, and there's a lot of them, some projects are just riddled with constraints, right? That's when it gets really difficult. If you have unlimited budget, unlimited time, and not that you had unlimited time at school, but a capstone project or a senior thesis, you might have the full semester or the full school year to complete, right? Whereas sometimes we have to do that level of thinking in a couple of months or in 1 month, right? So that was what for me. I was a very ambitious, very like I want to really be top of my game. Graduating and getting into the industry. So for me, it was like, it was just fun. It was easy. I could stay up all night doing it. But as we got into the industry and started to see how things are, it's still fun. Don't get me wrong, but it became a lot more challenging. And over the years, it became easier again, because I think the more you expand your library of assets, things that you've seen, experienced, learn, designed, the more things you design, especially as a consultant, the more things you're able to design, right? So in a sense, it gets easier, right? But those first, I would say 2-3 years were really challenging.
Like disheartening almost, because you're like, oh, I don't have this amount of freedom in like
Yeah, I
doing.
think it can be disheartening, but again, that excitement, I think, really carries you through. And I feel like designers are very optimistic. Some of that optimism has gone down with me over the years of just, this life. But I think designers are, generally speaking, an optimistic breed. So that naturally they're very positive about, what they bring to the table and what things can become and how powerful, it can be.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. As an optimist myself, I think that a lot of people see constraints as like stifling creativity, but I think that with the more constraints, sometimes you actually have the potential to be more creative because you have to think outside of the box of like making something work for those constraints. Whereas like I think a lot of creatives have that their imagination runs wild, and sometimes it's really hard to settle on something if you have so much freedom to create something. And so I think that is almost like, I don't know, it's fun to make your brain work that way to like solve a problem rather than kind of run wild with whatever you think would be really cool for something, which is also fun in its own right. But I think like creativity works both ways.
Absolutely. I mean, I like the constraints, to be honest. I've developed a love for the more constraints, the better, right? Because it gives me guardrails. Because to your point, you could do anything. And design is one of those industries where you can do anything. So the more constraints, the better the design becomes, right? Because it's targeted and now it can actually solve real problems in very specific ways, right? But I would say another, misconception I've seen a lot, and probably even had myself, is the misconception that we run things as designers. You know what I mean? And part of that, you go to conferences, you hear certain professors speak about design, and it's from this really empowerment perspective, which I think is great, but it's not realistic a lot. When you enter the corporate world and you realize that, there's other things that define whether a design is good or bad, even if it's really good and intuitive and user friendly. Is it making the company money? Is it are the stakeholders happy? There's just too many layers to it outside of just you as a designer. We think that, oh, it's my design. No, it's not your design, right? Even if you were the lead on it, there's so many layers to it and so many people that have to contribute to it. So in a sense, you can have a lot of control over the initial concepting, the initial nugget of the idea, but very little control over the actual execution of the idea when you actually factor in factories and supply chain and just it goes on and on and on.
Yes, exactly. There are a lot of things that, determine whether a design is good or bad that isn't necessarily based off of beauty. It's often based off of all these constraints that determine whether something is successful or not in the objectives that they're trying to hit.
Right, for sure.
So when going through those kind of processes, how does that part of the spectrum not stifle your creativity, like going through the bureaucracy of things, for lack of better phrasing?
So for me, and this is one of the things I try to tell anybody I have the opportunity to mentor or to guide or even share a 5-minute conversation with is, if you consider yourself a designer or a creative, even if it's not design specifically, but a creative, then you're a creative 24/7. If you can't be a creative 24/7, then what are you doing, right? That's just my personal philosophy. If you could, I think it's a privilege to do what we do. For me, I'm doing what I used to do when I was 8 years old. I would draw and create things. I mean, this is a dream. Now I get paid to do it, right? So if that's the privilege that you share alongside all other creatives, right? Then the least you can do is find ways of channeling that in everything that you do, right? You can't just say, I'm going to turn it on 9 to 5. Yes, you can. There's a lot of people that do that. I think you'll kind of live in a mediocre, and this is just my personal perspective, using strong words here, but that's how I feel. I think you'll just live in a mediocre zone. And if for some people, that's perfectly fine. It's not enough for me, right? So for me, the thing that helps is I try to tackle a lot of things, as many things as I possibly can as a design challenge, right? So it's okay. I'm tasked with designing a water bottle. There's all this bureaucracy and there's this, supply chain. There's so many reasons for this water bottle not to be absolutely amazing, right? Each one of those reasons is a design challenge. Okay. How do I communicate what I need to the right person so that they see the value in what we're trying to do and they can help push it forward? How do I motivate the foreman on the factory floor so that even though what I'm asking him to do is going to require more hours from his team, but he sees the value and the opportunity for return business, or for this product to go viral, or for whatever that can bring new business to his doorstep, right? I think every opportunity, and that's why I say it's exhausting, right? If you're doing it through and through, every opportunity is an opportunity to be a designer, not just in the thing that you designed and then you're just beating your chest saying, make it happen. No, you have to find ways to tell your story. You have to find ways to convince people as to why this needs to happen in that way. And then you have to also admit defeat every now and again and say, okay, you know what? I see your point. Let's compromise. Let's figure out what we can do. Or what are my trade-offs? A lot of times when I start a project, I've already come up with my 3 things that I'm willing to trade off on, but the 3 things that I absolutely won't trade off on. I don't think a lot of designers are doing that. I think a lot of designers come in with what they want, and then their world is rocked when they can't have it, right? Whereas for me, if I can't have it, I'm pivoting already, or I'm saying, you know what? I'm willing to give up these 2 things, but I need this thing. How do we make that happen?
No, that's a really great point of advice that honestly I haven't heard before. Not even not giving you credit for the idea. I don't know if anyone else out there is. Don't be offended, guys, if you also do this. But no, that's incredible, because you're really adjusting for. I think a lot of people fear maybe being more, for lack of a better word, risky with their ideas, because they're so worried about being turned down or it being crushed. And the idea of preparing for certain things, of like what you're willing to part with within that design, is really making you more set up for success and being disappointed. Because it's you should always be kind of considering, like worst case scenario, or maybe not worst case scenario, but these different feedbacks that you might get, and you should anticipate those, because that's how you kind of become a better designer, is like understanding like, okay, maybe this might not work, or maybe this might not work for this team, or whatever it may be. But to be prepared for that is like one step ahead, which is really, really awesome. And I haven't heard another designer, explain that to me before.
Well, I think it comes also with experience too. I think the longer you do it, the more you see patterns. Last time I did a project, the manufacturer complained about this, so I'm prepared for it. And it's also not to be jaded. Like, you still have to throw in some risks, otherwise you're not, advancing or pushing the envelope forward, right? But I would say, if you haven't developed the experience yet to be able to have the foresight to say, these are the things that are on the table to be compromised or negotiated, right? Then it's just that boundless creativity that comes in, right? It's like, okay, hey, this isn't working. We have to pivot. Instead of you freaking out, it's like, okay, bring it on. Let's do another design sprint, right? And sometimes it has to be on the spot. Sometimes you don't get another week to design sprint. You get another hour to like draw back to the drawing board, sketch some things out. Okay, figure this out. Okay, how about we go for this idea, right? So I feel like it's a balancing act of both. If you have a little bit of foresight, that helps. If you don't, you got to be creative. You got to use what your title suggests and create and design.
I completely agree with you, and I think that is incredible advice. To wrap up because we're approaching time, but I do like to end on like a future looking positive note. If you were, I mean, honestly, that not that that wasn't a positive note, but for the future, what are you excited about? What are you excited to work on? What are you excited to like? What are some goals that you have for yourself? And yeah, just tell me a little more about that so you can think about it and have fun.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how exciting my answer is going to be. I mean, I'm very excited to continue to grow our business. I don't have a ton of dreams about growing to a 100-person team. We're at like 6 to 7 people, is kind of what we hover around. But when I say grow our team, grow our client basis, and I'm a through and through designer, turned business owner, right? So I wear multiple hats now, but I'm still a designer at heart, and I always look forward to the next challenge, the next design, to create. And so for me, growing our client basis just means more opportunities to do what I love doing, and then to be able to bring that to our team, and hire people that are like-minded and want the same thing, have the same ambition, and just like, I take real pride when I look at the team and I see them working on something they really enjoy, right? I mean, sometimes I'll take some of the more tedious projects, just put it on my plate so that they can have the more fun, creative projects, right? Because there's all types of projects that you could have, and it all pays the bills, so it's all necessary, right?
Yeah.
But that's really what I'm looking forward to in the next few years. Is like, we started I started the business back in 2019 officially. My wife joined maybe 3 years ago full time, when she left her job, and we've been able to start growing it, and there's been a lot of sacrifice. There's been a lot of putting money aside, really saving and just reinvesting into the business. And so we're finally at a time, not too long ago, where we finally actually started paying ourselves. You know what I mean? So, and it wasn't much. Don't get me wrong, not even close. It's something, right? So now, as we're getting a little bit more maturity, like, I want to continue to grow that. I want to continue to build that, because ultimately, like, I don't want to design this studio where I have to be here day in, day out, for the rest of my life, right? Like, I like to be here, so I want to be here as often as I can.
Of course.
But I would like to build a business that, doesn't require me to run, right? And so, we're working on that every day. We're building systems in place. We're really challenging ourselves to wear more of that business hat. I don't think designers make great business professionals, to be honest, because we're very generous. We're incredibly generous with our time, with our ideas, that type of thing. And you have to be a lot more strategic and a lot more, a little bit more cutthroat, a little bit more just like definitive as a business owner, right? So, we're learning a lot of that. We don't want to lose ourselves in the process. We still want to be generous. We still want to be who we are. But at the same time, learning those lessons the hard way, learning how we have to, set contracts in place and wear certain hats and just protect ourselves, is I think going to also help us with, growing and longevity, right? So I'm just excited to see, how this business grows. And like I said, not interested in this being like a massive, 100-person team or anything, not even close to that. I want to keep it small and agile and super, just, when people come in the studio, they're excited. They're excited to get working, and they're excited for the stuff that they're doing. So yeah, that's what excites me.
I love that. And I think you're focused on the right things, honestly. I think a lot of people excited about growth, but it's more like monetary or, and that's fine too. But I mean, it seems like you're excited to just, the monetary things are important too, but to have your team be happy and like to be, I find it really important that you specifically mentioned about like that you don't want this to be something so big, because I think that a lot of people see that as, a lack of growth or a lack of success. And I don't think that's true at all. I think that having a like knowing that you like the size of the team that you want and knowing that that'll make you happy and that your team will be happy is something to be realistic about, because some people don't want their business to be this huge thing, and that doesn't mean that they're not making money or paying the bills or that they're not being successful. It just means like, I mean, if different people want different things, and I think that other teams have the more potential to be happy when we don't have these corporate structures a lot of the time too that are massive and sometimes stifling.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the greatest things as a young designer that, one could have the opportunity is to be able to launch a product, to be able to work on something that you see out in the world. It's so rewarding. And, you with a larger team, you have a lot more competition. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And competition can be good, can be healthy, but for those just joining, just starting out, they have a harder time. You could be at a company for 8 years before you launch your first product, right? So with a smaller team, as long as the team is ambitious, as long as they're self-motivated, as long as they're driven, right, they all have an opportunity to launch something. Even as had interns launch products, like work on things that are on shelves that you could buy, right? And that's like super rewarding for them, but it's rewarding for me to see that, because they can have that in their portfolio and they can kind of solidify their career as they move forward. What a stamp of achievement that is.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It's like, it's wonderful to be on a small team, be able to see like the direct fruits of your labor, like to be able to see exactly what you've done and that it didn't go through 25 other people to, change into this completely different thing, or even if you did have, your hands in it. So I think that is a privilege to be able to have that and be in that situation. So to be able to foster that is wonderful.
Yeah, it's a privilege for sure. I mean, it doesn't come without its challenges, right? You can't hide behind anyone, right? Regardless of what your level is in the business, like you are there, everyone can see you. You mess up, everyone sees it. You do good, everyone sees it, right? So it's got its pros and its cons, right? But if you're, like I said, for those that are ambitious and this is what they really enjoy doing, it's absolutely a privilege.
100%. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This is absolutely so fun. I had a great time. I learned a lot, which is selfishly why I love this podcast so much, but I know that our audience will learn a lot too. And just thank you so much for providing all your insights.
Yeah, no, thanks for the opportunity to get here and just chat. You never know where these conversations will go. I don't know. I didn't really come into this with a lot of expectations, but I'm glad it went the direction that it did, because I didn't consider a lot of the things I was going to say, and I didn't sound too crazy, I don't think.
No, not at all. Yeah, that's the best part is, these are all unique conversations because I say, no, I'm not providing you with any information before going in completely blind. But yeah, no, this was a wonderful conversation. I think you provided a lot of helpful advice for our audience. So I am so completely happy with how this went. And thank you so much again. I wish for all your goals and what you're looking forward to come true. And yeah, thank you again for joining me. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you can check out Show Design in the description. And thank you so much. Have a lovely day, everyone.
Okay, cheers.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest. And to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend and, of course, subscribe.